You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network. It's your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. And a Thanksgiving crossover Thursday here. Cody Davis of Locked On Texans, Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. And today's episode of Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is so much fun. It's easy to play. No competing against other players. It's you versus the projections in-house. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 extra money on your entry. It takes less than 60 seconds to enter. It's that easy. We love Prize Picks, and we know that you will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Dolphins, Texans, Week 12. Crazy to believe it's Week 12 already, but Cody, good to catch up with you, talk a little bit of ball. How you holding up in the midst of this 2022 season?
Man, I wish I was doing better. For the second year in a row, we're doing this, and I'm hoping and wishing that I was doing better. This franchise, man, covering it give you a headache. I'm not lying. It's always something going on.
Well, and it's weird to be in the position that the Dolphins find themselves in, because typically you're sitting around pins and needles. When's it going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong? How's it going to go wrong? It can't possibly go wrong. And then it does. Like the Dolphins have tested Dolphins fans for the better part of 2 decades now with all of these twists and turns throughout the course of the season, but sitting in 7-3 coming off of the bye, they're looking to kind of put their foot back down on the gas. And I'm sure, Cody, if I asked you what the biggest storyline is for the Texans, you'd probably tell me it's this will they, won't they, smoke and mirrors, quarterback situation. Like, is there anything else going on coming into this game, or is that kind of the thing here this week?
That's the biggest storyline going into this game. And it was so frustrating sitting there listening to Lovie Smith, sitting there listening to Pep Hamilton, sitting there listening to General Manager Nick Caserio on Sports Radio 610. Kyle, we were going up on a year to when they first gave Davis Mills the title as this team's starting quarterback. For almost 365 days, this is a franchise that has continuously came out and showed they support and stuck by Davis Mills. Things hasn't gone well this year, and now all of a sudden, it's obvious that this team is moving on from Davis Mills as this team's starting quarterback. Everyone knows it, but they don't want to announce it. And it just got everybody a little bit frustrating. And when you take a look at Sunday's game, that is the biggest storyline. Kyle Allen is going to start. So you have to look at this from a standpoint is, how much better will Kyle Allen make this team? And if not how much better, just how much more watchable will he make this team? Because I can't tell you how many times watching this organization throughout the 2022 campaign, whether it be for a quarter, whether it be for a half, or whether it be for a whole entire game, you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself that this is a bad football team, to the point on Sunday against the Washington Commanders with Davis Mills as the starting quarterback, you only had 5 yards in the first half because you couldn't establish the run. And this came after Davis Mills, quote unquote, called out the offensive coordinator because he wanted to go out there and be aggressive. And on the second play of the game, you threw a pick 6. So you have to look at this game on the Houston Texans side of things and just think to yourself, look, at the end of the day, I still do not see this team winning in Miami, but will they just look more competitive, and will they look more so of a competent team with Kyle Allen as this team starting quarterback on Sunday?
And Cody, before I get into the storyline for the Dolphins, I would just love to hear your thoughts as somebody who has observed the team and has been following the team as closely as you have for several years now. When you try to compartmentalize blame, right, and assessing, they've made the decision that Davis Mills needs to change as far as being the starting quarterback because they're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the results that they want offensively. How much of that is Davis Mills and execution? How much of that is the attention to detail and coaching? How much of that is the personnel around Davis Mills? I mean, Davis Mills came out of Stanford as a guy who was like a 1 year starter. So
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise that there were going to be some growing pains. Is it on Davis Mills to get to the point where we need to make a change, or are they looking for a spark? Or like, how do you perceive the blame, the weight of the blame for the shortcomings offensively in at least the last couple of weeks?
I think you have to take a look at everybody, and there's been this big debate down here in the city of Houston as to whether or not Pep Hamilton should continue to be the play caller. Now, Lovie Smith came out and said on yesterday that he does not plan on changing who's going to take the helm as his team offensive play caller. That is going to continue to be Pep Hamilton. But I say all that just to say, when you go out there and you watch this team play, there are times where you can question the play calling. Like this play doesn't make sense at this particular of the game. I get all that, but at the same time, it is hard to evaluate Pep Hamilton due to the regression of Davis Mills. Now, look, coming into the season, I did not think Davis Mills was going to be all of a sudden a top 5, top 10 quarterback or whatever the case might be. But when you go back and you take a look at the last 5 games of the regular season in 2021, when he took the helms as his team starting quarterback, you saw promise and you saw progress. And there were so many people, including myself, looked at that and said, you know what? He might not be this team starting quarterback for the future where he could have the title as franchise quarterback. But if he continues to progress in the way that he did last year, then you could say, okay, he could be this team starting quarterback for 2022, 2023, while we take care of holes around the rest of the team, like fixing your offensive line, getting more offensive players that's going to boost the wide receiving core, fixing the holes on the defensive line. Like, if he's able to be a quality starting quarterback, you could focus on those things. However, Davis Mills, for one reason or another, has regressed, and that is why a big part as to why the Houston Texans are in this position and why they are sitting at 1-8-1 entering Week 12 of the regular season.
So for the Dolphins coming out of this game, I've kind of already poked fun at a little bit, but they're in recent uncharted waters. The last time the Dolphins were 7-3 through 10 games was 2002. It's been 20 years since the last time the Dolphins won 7 of their first 10 football games. And Dolphins fans had a lot of optimism based on the games that they lost, and they came in the absence of Tua Tagovailoa with the concussion suffered on Thursday Night Football against the Bengals, and then the 2 successive games. Those were the games that they lost. And, Miami coming out of this game, very suddenly the narrative before the season was make the playoffs, win a playoff game. Those are the expectations. Well, now suddenly you're looking at the schedule. You've got a number of divisional games left on your schedule. You got to go to Buffalo, you got to go to New England, and you host the Jets. You have this game coming out of the bye week where you have a chance to kind of get everybody refreshed. But after this game, you've got a 3-week stretch where you're on the road in San Francisco, Los Angeles against the Chargers, and the Buffalo Bills. And that's the next 3 weeks after this game. So looking at the big picture, it's changed for Miami at 7-3. These are expectations and an air of competitiveness that Miami largely hasn't tasted in the last 2 decades. So I think the team understands the weight of this opportunity. And coming out of the bye week, there has to be a sense of urgency for the Dolphins to get back to the momentum that they carried into the bye week with the 4-game winning streak, because the rubber's going to meet the road here in December. And we're going to find out a lot about the Dolphins. But with a team like the Texans, who have been struggling to find their footing coming to South Florida, there should be a certain level of focus. And this is the NFL. The question is, first-year coach in Mike McDaniel, how ready can he get the guys to be to play this game with the sense of urgency that they need with the big picture in mind? And if that takes care of itself, you'd like to think that the home field advantage and the talent discrepancy between the two teams, with Houston as a rebuilding roster versus the Dolphins, will tilt the margin in the Dolphins' favor. But like I said, it's the NFL, and any given week could be the week that some team wakes up and decides they've had enough. And if you don't take them seriously, you're going to be in for a dogfight. And that's the challenge. That is the latest hurdle for the Dolphins to clear to avoid being the same old Dolphins, which is you're just waiting for it to go wrong. So that for me, coming out of the bye week, obviously you didn't have a game to talk about last week, is the big question is, okay, did you drink too much of the Kool-Aid or are you guys ready to go? And that for the Dolphins is the big hurdle that I think a lot of people in South Florida are going to be really interested to see. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Texans is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual, so when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour to the complex engine called you. Everyone deserves to feel their best. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. As the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. All the benefits of in-person therapy, plus it's more convenient, more accessible, and more affordable. Just fill out the brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. And if things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist at any time. Could not be simpler. There's no waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist for you. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/locked on. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. So Cody, let's talk matchups in this game. I know Houston has a young team. They've got a lot of young guys that they've invested in recently. I know Derek Stingley's been dealing with a hamstring injury, but you got Jalen Petrie in the secondary. You got Damion Pierce toting the rock like one of the angriest dudes in the league. When you look at this matchup for Houston, who are a couple of the key names that are going to have to play their best football for this contest if Houston's going to get this thing done?
It's not even a question on, who has to play their best football. I think it just comes down to the one guy that is going to be available or not, and that's Derek Stingley Jr. He missed Sunday's game against the Washington Commanders, and due to a hamstring injury. On yesterday, he did not practice, and I'm looking at this from a standpoint. If Derek Stingley is not ready to go come Sunday against Jalen and Tyreek Hill, this could really be an uglier matchup for the Houston Texans. And, I understand that Derek Stingley has not had the phenomenal rookie campaign like Sauce Gardner has had in New York. And a big part of that is because he is playing in a system, in Lovie Smith's system, where he continued to stick by this Tampa 2 defense, runs a lot of coverages, zone coverages, and he has not orchestrated a defense that is suited to Derek Stingley's best attribute as a one-on-one man covered defensive back, like we saw Robert Saleh has done in New York with Ahmad Sauce Gardner. However, even with all of that in play, Derek Stingley Jr. has still had somewhat of a solid defensive rookie campaign this year. Me and my co-host John talked about this a couple days ago. I can't remember if it was on Monday or on Tuesday's show, but we talked about how Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie, even though they are not playing at their best, you can definitely tell that those two guys has definitely enhanced the Houston Texans secondary. And without Derek Stingley Sunday against the Washington Commanders, you saw a different secondary going out there on the field, especially the second half of that game. Now, you take a look at the fact that they're going up against arguably, if not the best, two-headed wide receiving tandem in Jalen and Tyreek Hill. I'm looking at this from a standpoint, if Derek Stingley doesn't play, things could get really bad for the Houston Texans moving forward.
So we've talked about the coaches, and I know you mentioned Pep Hamilton, but I wanted to talk about this running game that Houston does have, where if you're looking for bright spots, obviously Damion Pierce and how well he's run the ball is right up there. He's among the rookie leaders in rushing yardage. Talk to me a little bit about how he's had success. What are they doing to get him going? And how are they able to, and I know this did not happen against Washington, but how are they able to keep him involved in games as games stretch from 15 minutes to 30 minutes to 45 as you get deeper in the game and you start kind of looking up at the scoreboard and asking yourself what kind of urgency we have to try and put points on the board in a hurry.
Damion Pierce, me and my co-host John, we joke a lot. If there was an MVP on this team, it definitely has to go to Damion Pierce. He is basically the only reason why the Houston Texans offense have been able to score points this year and sustain drives and just make this team watchable at times. And when you go back to Sunday's game, he had his worst game by far. I think he had like 10 carries for 8 yards or vice versa. But the one thing that I've noticed about Damion Pierce in that game is the fact that his performance wasn't his fault. It was more so the offensive line, especially the rookie Keon Green. Keon Green is going through a tough learning curve right now. And, the last couple of weeks, it has been very bad for him. And of course, Sunday was by far his worst performance. And the reason why Keon Green is so important is because the Houston Texans, he enhanced the Houston Texans offensive line in their run blocking. I mean, if you ask me, I think he is, if not their best, no lower than his second best run blocker, because that's his best on-field attribute. And on Sunday, he could not create any type of gaps, which means there was a lot of times to where when when Damion Pierce got the ball, the defensive line unit was already in the backfield, so it made it hard for him to create plays like he normally do. But outside of that game, this is a guy, every time he struggled with something early on in the season, he had a problem with fumbling the football in the game against the Chicago Bears. He fixed that. Early on in the year, there was a problem with his pass protection. He fixed that. And not only that, this is a guy who runs hard, and he could run through contact as well. I mean, just take a look at one of, if not the best play of the season for the Houston Texans. When he had opportunity, I believe he rushed for 20 yards and he broke like 8 or 9 tackles in the midst of things. Like, Damion Pierce is just he is already has the title as the best running back since Arian Foster in Houston Texans history.
I'm eager to see how the Dolphins choose to defend him. They obviously had the Browns ahead of the bye, and they ran a lot of bare and tight fronts where they take interior 3 linemen, and it's usually Wilkins, Zach Sealer, and Raekwon Davis on the nose. And they'll put Davis head up on the center, and then they'll have either 2-4 eyes or 2-3 techniques where they're covering those B gaps with putting a body in every single gap. And they'll have the center, they're kind of lock you into going man on the center, and then having Wilkins and Sealer play in the B gap. And aside of a 33-yard run that Nick Chubb had where he got the boundary and broke a tackle from UDFA safety Verone McKinley about 12 yards upfield that went for 33 total yards, they did a really nice job. His other 10 carries were 10 for 30 yards against Nick Chubb. So I'll be interested to see if they kind of bring the same defensive structure into this game against Houston. But the last couple of weeks, they've gotten a little bit back more into the man-to-man coverage shells on the back end because they're looking at the wide receiver cores of Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland. And they're saying, well, we got Xavier Howard, so we're going to put him on the best guy, and we'll go man across the board, and we're going to force quarterbacks to throw into tight windows in man coverage because we feel like even though we don't have all of our corners, we can play man-to-man on our money downs. And they've had some success doing that. Justin Fields killed him on third downs just by using his legs and getting off his spot. So be interested to see how they test Kyle Allen if they choose to bring that same formula into this contest that they have the last couple of weeks. But that's the recipe that I would expect to see from Miami. And then it'll be on Houston and Brandon Cooks and Davis Mills or Nico Collins in a contested catch situation to, win at the catch point and force Miami to get out of that by making a couple plays down the field, either with speed, vertically stacking guys, or potentially with Nico kind of posting somebody up, which they have the potential to do. But I think it is important for Houston to hit on a couple of those early in this football game if they want to kind of set a tone in which they're going to have a competitive stretch throughout the entire course of the game. Because I think if Miami puts up 14, 17 points in a hurry, which they're certainly capable of doing, that's not the recipe that you want if you're Houston coming into this game to have to go against this defense in that regard. Our friends over at betonline.net are your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league, From football to basketball to soccer to esports, they've got it all over at betonline.net. And if you love sports, you can find sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. The fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. If you've thought about securing your home with home security and have been putting it off, please stop, listen up. Right now, Crossover Thursday listeners here on Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Texans can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, so you do not want to miss it. Simply Safe in an emergency has 24/7 professional monitoring agents that use fast protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe, capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real at your home so you can get the priority police response that you need. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, and smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when the threat is real. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, you can stay completely in control of your system anytime, anywhere, armed, disarmed, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust your system settings. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that we would recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl because there is no safe like Simply Safe. So Cody, it's the end of the road here, which means it's usually time for us to do some predictions for this football game. So as the visiting team, I'd give you the courtesy of choosing the coin toss here. Do you want to go first or second for predictions here for Sunday's game?
I go first. My prediction is fairly simple. There's really nothing to look forward to with this game for the Houston Texans. I mean, yes, there is the Kyle Allen side of things because look, I do believe he will make this team watchable, but I also do believe that the Houston Texans still will not have enough to stop one of the teams that's been one of the best teams in the league all season. So, on Sunday's matchup, I'm going to go Miami 27-7. I do believe that the Texans defense, they've been holding their own at times, and that's part of the reason why a lot of these games have been one-score losses for them. However, if Derek Stingley Jr. isn't able to go to at least help contain the Dolphins' wide receiving core, I do believe things might get ugly. But Kyle, before you give your prediction, I do want to ask you a very important question.
Okay.
How great has it been to see Tua thrive in year 3? Because I remember last year when we did this, It was right after the trade deadline. And I said, just give my boy a chance. And Miami finally gave him a chance. And now he's MVP candidate.
Yeah, it's such a surreal turnaround. And, I've been very patient and deliberate. And there's been some diehard Dolphins fans that were like, hey, like Mr. Incomplete Evaluation, you didn't believe. And yeah, I mean, you go back and read my draft report the year that he came out for Draft Network. I loved Tua when he came out. And we talked one time with quarterbacks coach Jordan Palmer, who's worked with a lot of really successful quarterbacks. He worked with Josh Allen, is kind of like the guy right now. He worked for a stretch with Joe Burrow. And what we asked him is, we asked him two things that I think are relevant to the Tua discussion right now. We asked him, what is the #1 common trait for all high-level successful quarterbacks? And he says, it's not arm strength, it's not athleticism, it's not mobility, it's confidence. And you think about the position that the Dolphins had put Tua Tagovailoa in all throughout the 2021 offseason, all the way through the trade deadline with Brian Flores, and it breeds anything but confidence, right? So then you get to the end of the season, they make a change, they bring in Coach McDaniel, they get Tyreek Hill, they spend all offseason gassing him up, and everybody's like, yo, okay, Tyreek, keep talking that talking up Tua. And then lo and behold, you see a different person. You literally see a different person in practice clips. He was just mic'd up for the Browns game. You saw a different person in watching the mic'd up clips for him and how he operates on the field, how he interacts with his teammates, the discussions he's having with his coach. It's really eye-opening. And I came back to that point by Jordan Palmer it's about breeding confidence and then incubating that confidence so that you can sustain it. And what we've seen from Tua this year is a level of confidence that he hadn't had since he ripped off 2nd and 26 in the Natty against Georgia when he was a freshman. And that has been one of the biggest catalysts for his success, which I think is really cool. And the other thing that he said, and I think about this for Davis Mills, and I think about this for Zach Wilson up in New York, and I think about this for a lot of young coaches. He said teams bust on players more often than, or teams bust on quarterbacks more often than quarterbacks actually bust on the team themselves. So you think about not breeding confidence, and you think about not addressing the Watson rumors in the way in which Brian Flores was so quick to dismiss and say, Tua's our quarterback. That's it. No further questions. It was his default answer to anything that was questioned about that situation. And you look at the personnel that they had versus what the style of play that Tua had at Alabama. Well, he was used to throwing a really speedy guys who won early in the rep and gave him confidence to, is it there? Yes or no. If it's there, yes, ball's out. If it's not, no, okay, I'm very quickly going to get to my second read. Well, with these slower guys and these guys who don't separate as much, Tua's getting stuck on the reads a little bit because he's waiting for the route to develop before he has to make a decision. So it's like reading right to left instead of left to right. You know, your body and your brain can naturally process it so much quicker if you go a certain way versus a way that you're not used to. So the personnel changes that they've made, and they took calling protections off his plate, which was an expectation that he had under Brian Flores. And I get it, dude. You spent 20 years coaching in New England, and Tom Brady was your only expectation on what an NFL quarterback is supposed to look like. But, dude, like, wake up. That's not how everybody operates.
Exactly.
And it felt like that was the standard that he held Tua to as a young quarterback was, bro, you got to be Tom Brady because that's how I know how to win. And when that didn't happen, the divide grew, and the Dolphins made the decision that they did. And seeing them not bust Tua to allow him to then fulfill the self-fulfilling prophecy of not being up to his potential is a really important part of this storyline for Miami. And Cody, I'm glad you remembered saying, give my guy Tua a chance. Because it is such a crazy 365-day path since the last time that we had a chance to talk. I know it's a little bit longer than that, but not too far off. So it's night and day. It really is. As far as the game, I'm going to give Texans a little bit more credit than you are. I'm going to say they score 16 in this game. I think they get a couple scoring drives together. I think Kyle Allen gets some life in this team. I do think Miami's probably going to put up, they've scored 30 in 3 straight, looking to make it 4. So give me 31-16 Dolphins in this contest. So a 2-score game. But the big thing for the Dolphins is turnovers and sacks. They've turned the ball over once in the last 4 games, and they've given up 2 sacks in the last 4 games. So those are things for Houston. If you want to get Miami off your script, you got to instill negative plays when the Dolphins have the ball, whether that's self-inflicted from Miami of lack of attention to detail, bounces of the ball, or you forcing those errors yourself. I think those are really critical for Houston to make this game be the kind that Houston can look up in the fourth quarter and say, hey, I think we got a chance to win this football game.
No, they don't.
Listen,
No, they don't.
Listen, it's the NFL.
Yeah, it's the NFL. Any given Sunday, all
At
of that
least
is
feed into
true,
it a little bit.
except for Houston. Man, in fact, that statement was more true for the Texans last year than it is this year. Like, I think this year is more so of a mess than last year was.
Well, I know I speak for Dolphins fans who lived through a rebuild that had some questionable moments early on in its infancy. We hope you guys get it turned around, and we look forward to hopefully doing this with some first place matchups on the schedule in years to come for sure. But Cody,
Yes, sir.
It's been great chatting with you, dude. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody listening has a great Thanksgiving, and I hope you guys enjoy the game.
You too, man.
Crossover Thursday here on Locked On Network. That's it. We're out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Texans for all your Texans needs, Locked On Dolphins for all your Dolphins needs, and check out every show that we have on the Locked On Network. We have all of your sports, your team every day. Thanks for listening.